Hello, BookTube. As you can tell from the title of this video, our subject today is the chunker. That wonderfully descriptive BookTube term for books that are obscenely long, intimidatingly, imposingly long books. I admit, I make no secret of the fact that I love chunkers. They allow me to settle in and relax. They have long, complicated stories to tell. Uh, but I know they can be intimidating, and I wanted to make a video recommending some of them to you. And once I started thinking about that, I realized that they come in all walks and all shapes and all genres. So our first one today will be classic chunkers. Very long books from the canons of literature that are well worth your time. Starting with the single most important book ever written, which of course is the Bible. The King James Bible would be, my choice, but there are all sorts of easier, softer, more rounded-edged translations out there. But you have to read it. It's very long, but it'll keep you going. Our next one is from medieval Japan. It's a book that I've held up here on the channel before. It's The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu. This is one of the earliest novels. It's very long. It's the story of court life and one particular figure in court life, Genji, who's an attractive, somewhat vain, foppish young man. We follow him through the vicissitudes of his life, and we meet an enormous cast of characters. And it couldn't happen the way it does in this book. It couldn't affect you the way it does. Watching these people grow, watching Genji become a man, have children of his own, watching the children grow up, if it were shorter, it has to be an atmosphere. It has to be a world. Another one we have here, this is in a little paperback. This is The Fairy Queen by Edmund Spenser. This is his enormous allegorical poem about Queen Elizabeth I. And it's full of adventure, and it's full of thought, and it's full of vigorous imagery. And like the others here, it would lose something real, something valuable, if it were shorter. It sprawls for a reason. It draws you in. By the time you're, a fifth of the way in, you'll want to keep reading. Then we move forward a little in time to another book that I've held up on this channel before at the risk of spraining my wrist, and that is Samuel Richardson's Clarissa. A gigantic novel, one of the very first of the modern European-style novels, about a smart, love-struck young woman and the struggle that her family has to make sure she marries well. It's told in epistolary form, and the letters are wonderful and engaging, and it's I know it's intimidating to look at, but it maps out the microscopic changes that everyone in this young woman's life feel about her relationships. Something would very much be missing if it were telescoped. We want to follow it day by day, sometimes hour by hour. And speaking of day by day and hour by hour, our next one is nonfiction. It's still a classic. It's, of course, Boswell's Life of Johnson, which has been called the greatest biography ever written, even though it's not technically a biography. It's more like a million little sketches of James Boswell's observations and thoughts and recorded conversations of Samuel Johnson. And it exists, of course, in many abridgments. You don't have to read the unabridged version, although I strongly recommend the Penguin if you do. It's amazing in terms of giving you all the background and notes that you need to be up to speed, because Boswell does his best, but he had no idea, I don't think, in his syphilitic imagination, that his book would still be read hundreds of years later. Maybe he did. He certainly dreamed big when he was a kid. But the images, the glimpses that this gives you of all the people involved, not just Johnson, but everybody, are amazing and amazingly addictive. This is one of those big books that I promise you, if you read a chunk of it, you'll want to read more. You'll wish that it were 5 times as long. And our last one, our last classic chunker for today, is another thing that I've held up on this channel before. It's War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. His sprawling Napoleonic era that has a cast of thousands and travels through time in a very slow and methodical way, takes us through peace and sickbeds and love and battles, and couldn't do that as effectively if it didn't do that as exhaustively. Now, this is the Peviar and Volkonsky translation, but there are, 5 or 6 really good translations out there. They all have their strengths and weaknesses, and all of them succeed. There aren't any failed War and Peace translations that I know of. I've read 5 of them, and I don't know of any that fail. So you can't really go wrong if you go to the library. It doesn't have to be this, although don't read it in abridgment. There are plenty of abridgments out there, but they're for the weak. You want to assault a chunker. You want to go through it, marking not only the passage of time in the book, but the passage of time in your life while you read it. At least for me, that's part of the allure here, is that these things are organic. They grow as they go. But that's it. That's a handful of classic chunkers that I strongly recommend. And next time, we'll do fiction, modern fiction. I'll see you then. Thank you, too.